All right, guys, what's going on? Mike here at Skill of Strength. My buddy Hector, he's one of our strength coaches here at Skill of Strength. What we're gonna do today is just show you some of my favorite exercises to work on strengthening your low back. Now, before we dive into these, listen, if you're currently in pain or you do have an injury where you don't know what the source of pain is, go to a medical professional and get checked out. So these exercises are for people that are cleared by a medical professional and they are, they've got the okay to take part in an exercise program. So we're gonna dive right in here. A lot of the times people stand all day, they've got some stuff going on, they get very, very grumpy backs, and people always ask me, what can I do? And honestly, one of the best things you can do is rest, is actually just lay off and rest. Believe it or not, you'd be amazed at what rest can do. And one of my favorite things to show people is just the 90-90 position, where they can just rest and kind of deload their spine. It's generally a very comfy position. So I'm gonna show you guys that right now. So come on over, Hector. So guys, I'm gonna set him up, and again, we talk about 90-90, we're talking about 90 degrees at the hip and 90 degrees at the knee. So I wanna show you something right here. Guys, this is not what we're looking for, right? We want the bench to actually do the work and support the legs. So we wanna tuck this in a little bit more, so lift up. And we want to really get him comfy so the bench is doing the work for him. Okay, that's really a biggie. And all we're trying to do here is find a position where you're comfortable and just do some basic diaphragmatic breathing. I've had several disc herniations over the years, and this was an absolute game changer for me. When it has happened, I laid down in this position and just relaxed, and this helped tremendously. So don't underestimate just the ability to just sit there at that 90-90 position, breathe and rest. It's an absolute game changer, and I think more and more people should do it, especially if they're standing all day and maybe by the end of the day they've got a grumpy low back. So this is a biggie. So that's the first thing, guys. Rest. Find a position that's comfortable and rest. I prefer the 90-90 position. It's a fantastic way to just kind of deload that spine. So we're going to dive right into some exercises. I'm going to show you 5 exercises today. None of which are my own. I've stolen them from all of the biggies out there, right? And so this is not my material, guys. This is from really, really smart people, much smarter than I am. And I'm just sort of, the messenger showing you our take on it and some different ways to approach it. So I'm just gonna move this out of the way. So when it comes to low backs, if you haven't heard of this guy named Stuart McGill, I highly recommend that you look at his material. Besides having a fantastic mustache, I believe he still has a mustache, he is a genius when it comes to the low back world. And if you need recommendations or you want material on low back health, Stuart McGill, Low Back Disorders and the Back Mechanic, which is one of his most recent books, I would highly, highly recommend. So check those out and go from there. So the first thing we're gonna go through is the curl up. And again, these first 3, the curl up, the side plank and variations of the side plank, and the Birddog are what McGill calls his big 3. And we're just gonna show you that and a couple of variations of that. So we're gonna start with the curl up. The first thing we're gonna have Hector do is take his hands and put it under the curvature of his lower back, okay? Now, a big mistake that people make in low back is they just say, crunch the low back flat, crunch the low back flat. For some people, that's a good cue. For others, it's not. So you have to make sure that you understand sort of the spinal curvature and what's appropriate for your client. So what we're gonna have him do is he's gonna take one leg and extend it out straight. And the opposite leg is just gonna be tucked inward, okay? So what we're trying to do here is maintain the same positioning of the lumbar spine throughout. Okay, so when he does this drill, he shouldn't go up into extension and he shouldn't go into flexion. We should just try to maintain the same position. So what we're gonna try to do here is a basic curl up. So I'm gonna give him some simple cues. The first thing I'm gonna have him do is just bring his elbows slightly off of the ground, okay? And when he curls up, it's really his upper body that's curling up. That's gonna fire that anterior core, and that's gonna really make everything zip up. Now, make sure that we're not cranking on the neck and moving the neck into too much cervical flexion, okay? So when he comes up, it should almost look like he's sort of separated here from the thoracic and lumbar spine, and he just has a little bit of a curl off of the ground. So elbows off the ground slightly, curls up, and he's just gonna hang out there. Again, start with maybe 5 to 10 seconds and then relax. The way to approach this from a programming standpoint is to do multiple sets that are not super non-fatiguing, right? You could do 6 sets of 10 seconds to start off with instead of a 1 60-second hold, okay? So when you attack any of this stuff, we wanna make sure that you're not getting so fatigued that you start to compensate and start to have some pretty crappy patterns. So just make sure when you do the curl up, you're alternating sides, etc. So that's the first one, okay? So the curl up, awesome exercise by Stuart McGill. So we're gonna go into side plank, and we're gonna show you the kneeling side plank. We're actually gonna show you from 2 different angles. So Hector, get onto one side, please. We're just gonna go through the setup quickly, guys. So the first thing that we're looking for is to make sure that we have a good shoulder position. So we wanna make sure that the elbow is directly underneath the shoulder, and he's not too far out, or obviously not too far in towards his hips. Now in this position, this is our home base. IQ kind of squish the shoulder blades back a little bit, and if you actively push into the ground, that's gonna help stabilize the shoulder. You can actually, if you have a tough time stabilizing the shoulder in the side plank, if you actually make a fist, that will actually help stabilize the shoulder as well. So from here, I'm gonna have him bring his knees back just a little bit. And again, we're looking to see if we can recreate that same lumbar curvature here. The biggest mistake I see in any side plank variation is people side plank and they slip into this big extended position. So they start off in a nice neutral position for them, and then they get into this side plank, and then boom, they go into hyperextension. So that's not what we're looking for, guys. So we're gonna start with a very easy side plank, which is a kneeling side plank. So the 2 points of contact here are Hector's bottom knee and his elbow into the ground, okay? And what I'm gonna have him do, I'm gonna have him roll slightly forward, okay? Once we get into this position, that's gonna help him kind of activate all the musculature on the bottom side. We're gonna get a lot of oblique here, we're gonna get a little bit of QL, etc. Then we're just gonna have him elevate off the ground, and then boom. Now, at first, I wouldn't be too worried about the height of the side plank. Obviously, the higher the better, but there's a bunch of factors that goes into it. But what we're trying to look at here is just a basic side plank, boom, and then come down. So that's sort of your basic remedial side plank. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna make that side plank a little bit tougher, and we're just gonna lengthen the lever arm here. So we're gonna go out, and again, we're just gonna stack this. Actually, we're gonna have you stack, the top leg is gonna go in front, Hector. There you go, and body's in a straight line. And again, straighten that bottom leg for me. Yeah. So again, guys, we don't want him peeling open, so he's in extension, but we don't want him folding forward into flexion. So if you're looking at this from a straight line, that's what we should see is a straight line. We shouldn't see, a big curve like this. So if anything, try to push your hips a little bit more forward if you can. Good. And we've got a good lumbar curve, nice healthy shoulder position, and then boom, we're just gonna elevate the hips off the ground, and boom, we're gonna go from there. And you can relax. Good, and obviously do both sides and progress from there. So we've got the curl up, and that was our 2 variations of the side plank. And guys, if you want more information on how to do this, honestly, pick up McGill's book, The Back Mechanic. You can get it on Amazon. It's a fantastic book. Now, we're gonna move on to my favorite, which is the quadruped position. I just wrote an article for Functional Movement Systems, and if you're interested in that, check out their website. So quickly, we're gonna go through the setup, okay? So we want our knees directly underneath our shoulders. Knees underneath our shoulders. Our knees directly underneath our hips. So bring your knees a little bit forward, actually, bud. Right about there, and that looks pretty good. Can you rock back just a little bit? No, just rock. Boom, right there. And hands are directly underneath the shoulders. There we go. So feet, we're just gonna point the toes away, and we're gonna plantar flex. And that's the position. Now, guys, a really simple way to find a person's neutral spine. Everyone's different. This is a quick and dirty assessment. We're just gonna do a cat camel. So we're gonna have him go ahead and round his back. Yep, and we're just looking at sort of end range flexion. And then if we go into extension, kind of go back the other way and go into a big arch. And what we're trying to find is a nice lordotic curve, and you can come out of extension, and boom, right there. Guys, this is gonna be home base for him. And this is where we're gonna start all of his exercises from his lumbar curvature. There's a bunch of different things you can look at, scapular positioning, head position, all that other stuff. We're not gonna dive too deeply, but what we're trying to look for is a nice lordotic curve here, going up through the mid-back, and a nice neutral cervical curvature here. Now, the biggest mistake people make with any of these is they dive right into Birddogs, right? Easiest way to train this is to lift one limb at a time and then do some isometric holds. So what we're looking for is anytime we lift the limb, whether it's the arm or the leg, nothing should change in the rest of the body. Okay, so we're just gonna do some quick cues here. So I'm gonna have you lift your right hand up, and then boom, awesome. And we're just gonna have him hang out there for a little bit, okay? So you can, and guys, we're just looking for him to breathe and maintain positioning, and then come back in. And let's do the same thing on the opposite side for me, bud. Yep, boom. And again, we're looking for no change here, all right? And then you can just extend one leg back. Yep, and that's a full bird dog. So come back for 1 second. So let's just have you keep your hands down and your right knee your right leg's gonna extend back. So just, yeah, boom. And then from there, guys, perfect. And come back in. And let's do the same thing on the left side, okay? So guys, once he lifts that side off of the ground, we should see a change here. And when in doubt, slower is better. Good, you can come back down. So what we want to focus on here is moving one limb at a time, but making sure that we're not changing. Because guys, if you can't move one limb, don't go into that full bird dog yet, okay? If you find that lifting one limb is really, really easy, then we can go into the bird dog. Now, the big thing with the bird dog we want to focus on is, again, the opposing limbs are reaching out, and we want to make sure that we, as we come back, we maintain neutral, okay? So I'm going to just show you what we see a lot of errors in is we see people when performing the bird dog from a therapeutic exercise standpoint is they go into flexion and then they go into extension, and they're not actually stabilizing anything at their midsection. So I like to slow this down, and we like to put people in a position where they have to focus. If you slow them down and make them focus on sort of posture and make them focus on more of isometrics, it's going to make a big difference in how they're stabilizing. So we're just going to move, again, right hand forward, left leg back. And good, hang out there for a little bit. Now, if someone's got shoulder mobility issues, don't try to ask them to reach too high. They can just lift slightly. He looks pretty good here, and as he extends back, he looks pretty good here. And I'm just going to ask him to hang out here, guys. In my opinion, I like to start with these isometric holds before we add in some dynamic movement. So this is what I would consider a static bird dog, and then come down and reset, and then go from there. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can reset, meaning placing your hands back on the ground, or you can reach out, you can come back in. You're not actually resting and you're repeating the movement. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So go ahead, opposite limbs outward, and again, he's hanging out there. And now slowly come back in, and don't rest, and then come back, boom, and then slowly reach out again. So again, guys, what we're looking for here is the positioning of the lower back. So that's your basic bird dog variation, okay? From there, I'm gonna actually show you one of my favorite variations of a glute bridge, okay? So we're gonna get Hector to flip over onto his back, and we're gonna use a mini band for this, okay? We're gonna use the mini band so we can actually help fire his hips up. Mini bands perform better. Place to get them. So take the mini band, put it above the knees. Now, on all of those exercises that we just did, we're trying to maintain a neutral spine. Now, on the bridge, the way that I teach the bridge, we're actually going to ask him to perform a slight posterior pelvic tilt. And the reasoning is because when he does bridge his hips off of the ground, we want to make sure that he doesn't slip into lumbar extension. So one of the things that we can do is if we do a slight tilt, and we ask him to maintain that position as he bridges up, hopefully we can get the hips all of the way through and we can get nice hip extension without going into lumbar extension, if that makes sense. So what I like to cue, put your hands out to the side, is a very, very simple progression. We start off and I'll just cue them to tilt, and I want to make sure that they can do a slight posterior pelvic tilt. So tilt, and then I'm going to ask them to just spread the band to get their hip abductors to fire, and then I'm going to ask them to bridge up. And hold, and then come back down. Okay, and then relax for a second. And then, guys, we're gonna work on sequencing here. So we're gonna tilt, we're gonna spread the band, and then lift. And that's the sequencing I'll use. And I'll actually, you can rest. I'll actually start with a cadence, right? I'll actually tell them tilt, spread, lift, and just keep on going through it. Now, eventually, once they get it, they'll do one tilt. Go ahead and do a tilt for me. And maintain that tilt for me for the duration of these bridges. Spread the band out so we can fire those hips up just a little bit, right? And just give me 5 reps, okay? Awesome. And guys, we're looking for quality of movement here. And I'm going to show you something really unique to look for. Not unique, I mean, if you work with this stuff, it's not unique at all, but I just want to show you the difference. So if you can kind of get a metric of how high his hips are going, that's mainly hip extension. That's what we're looking for, right? Now just relax. Now, just kind of do a normal kind of spine position. Don't worry about that posterior tilt, okay? Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to spread the band still, and I want you to just bridge up as high as you can go. Now, you'll notice he's getting higher, but there's a pretty good chance that the lower back is going into lumbar hyperextension here. And guys, that's not what we're aiming for here. So what we're trying to do, you can relax. What we're trying to do is find a way to kind of lock down that lumbar spine a little bit and get the glutes to fire. And when you use the band with some slight abduction, that's a great way to just fire up everything on the outside of the hips. And then when you bridge up, you can really kind of work on your glutes in general. So that's a fantastic exercise to use as far as the bridging goes. Good, you can take that off, and we're going to go right back to the quadruped position for some plank variations. So again, hands and knees, guys, we're going back to quadruped. This is our home base, right? We want to make sure everything's stacked. Knees are directly underneath the hips. Hands are directly underneath the shoulders, etc., etc. Now, I'm going to take you through a little progression that we use here at SOS. The first thing is called the table plank. Now, the difference between this setup and the setup from the Birddog is ankle positioning. So we're going to pull the toes in, we're going to dig the toes in, okay? So he's going to have to use a little bit of ankle dorsiflexion, and he's going to have some extension of the big toes. So what we're going to do is we're going to have him find neutral, and I'm just going to cue him, right? To get his knees, I'm talking a ½ inch off of the ground. And you may not even be able to see it, but I want him to just lightly come on up and hold, and boom. Awesome. Guys, we're not going very far here. All we're trying to make sure that is we just get some activation. This is a fantastic way to train the plank, and just relax. Some people will call this a quadruped plank. Some people will call this a table plank. It doesn't really matter what you call it as long as you do it right. So we're going to do it again. Guys, these knees, again, we're talking ½ inch to 1 inch off of the ground. So go ahead and elevate, boom. You can see I can get my hand underneath there. And honestly, there's a ton of mileage in this. And actually, this is the start of the bear crawl position. So if you're just throwing people into bear crawls and they can't own this, you should probably regress a little bit and make sure that you've done your due diligence. Now, good, relax. Now, we're going to show you a progression of this called the mountain climber plank. So it looks just like a mountain climber, but it's still a static hold. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have you extend this leg back, okay? And I'm going to show you both ways. Now, you'll notice this is the start of a mountain climber, right? So we've got one leg that's a little bit more extended, and the opposing side is flexed. So all I'm going to have him do is maintain the nice positioning here, right? And we're going to have him lift that back knee again, ½ inch, 1 inch off of the ground, and perform an isometric hold. So go ahead, bud. And again, guys, a little bit of space. He doesn't have to shoot everything up into the air. We're just asking him to maintain positioning, and because he's lifting that knee off the ground just a little bit, it's going to be a fantastic way to challenge him. And let me tell you, this is a smoker. It's pretty tough. Good, and relax. We're going to do the other side now. So I just want you guys to get a visual. And guys, let me tell you, when you're doing this on camera and you're doing it with a ton of attention, and when you're getting tortured by me, it's a lot tougher. Okay, so again, extend one leg out, up on the great toe, find the nice positioning, knee off the ground. And guys, this is exactly what we're looking for. Okay, it's not going to change much. He's starting to shake a little bit. Guys, this stinks. It's not hard, but you can rest. Now, last but not least, this gets us into the tall plank, right? Or the start of the push-up position. This is a biggie. So here's how I like to teach the start of the positioning, okay? So let's go back to that mountain climber position, okay? Just for 1 second. You don't have to come off the ground. Now, we've already got one leg into extension, right? The other one's in flexion. So all I'm gonna have him do now is find that position, and from there, just kick the other leg out into the tall plank position. Make your feet a smidge wider for me, bud. And again, I'm just looking back, and all I'm trying to do is just do an isometric hold and make sure that we're not throwing anything under the bus. We should be able to draw a straight line from his ear to the shoulders to his hips, knees, and ankles, and relax. So guys, from there, you've got a ton of different ways that you can focus on dynamic stability in the tall plank position. So you can do mountain climbers, you can do shoulder taps. It doesn't really matter, but guys, these are the biggies. From there, there's a bunch of variations from that. Thanks for helping out, buddy. So guys, listen, we've given you some basic exercises. Remember, if you really want more information on this, McGill's got some great info on it. But hey guys, if you appreciated this video, do me a big favor, share, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a good day.